You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. Brian Kelly continues to absolutely crush it and flex as he continues to build his staff. Not just his on-field staff, which is finished, he has plucked coaches from spots all over the country, including a defensive coordinator from the Kansas City Chiefs, a receivers coach from the defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. But even in support staff roles, he's making very impressive hires. One of the things that was made pretty clear to us, sort of ear to ground early in the process, is that Brian Kelly thought Ed Orgeron had too many analysts. That not that analysts are a bad thing, and certainly they can fill a role, but the fact that maybe Ed Orgeron had too many, had a glut of them, and he wanted to sort of Brian Kelly wanted to pare that down a little bit. He was trying to make it a little more efficient, not quite as gluttonous. And so he started to build that support staff with analysts, and not just analysts, but analysts with ties to both the Southeastern Conference and to Brian Kelly to help ease a lot of this transition. One on each side of the ball in the last 24 hours have been reported. Let's start defensively with adding John Jancek. So John Jancek is a guy with a ton of SEC experience. He comes to LSU from Georgia and was on Kirby Smart's support staff there. Again, the staff that just won a national championship. If the name sounds familiar, you probably most recognize it from his time as the defensive coordinator at Tennessee under Butch Jones. That's right. He's been a defensive coordinator in the SEC, and he's now an analyst on Brian Kelly's staff. He was an analyst for Georgia, but his ties are not only to the SEC, but also to Brian Kelly. Jancek and Kelly worked together when Brian Kelly was at Grand Valley State. He later followed Brian Kelly at Western Michigan and then joined Butch Jones' staff at Cincinnati when Jones took over for Brian Kelly. So there's a lot of ties there. Brian Kelly was also hired, of course, Matt House to be his defensive coordinator. Well, House worked on staff with Jancek at Kentucky. So you can understand what Brian Kelly is doing. Not only is he hiring guys with ties to Louisiana, ties to the SEC, people that know this region, that know the league, but also guys that know each other, that create more connective tissue internally that's going to create a staff that gets along, that knows how to work together, that's worked well together, that respect each other. You're seeing all of that here as it's interwoven. Earlier this week, LSU added Corey Phillips in a prominent role, as Kelly added Phillips from NC State. The guy was also pursued by other Power 5 programs. And I mentioned Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee, now LSU will be the fourth SEC stop. That's two coaches for Brian Kelly now from the Georgia staff, with Jancek and with Cortez Hankton. So you pluck two guys away from a national championship winning staff to join a staff of a program that was 6-7 this most recent season. And there was some, I don't know if concern is the right word, but I did hear, maybe it is concern's a good word. I got asked pretty often when Brian Kelly first left Notre Dame and his assistants didn't follow, people asked, is there something to worry about with Brian Kelly that his assistants didn't come? And I think it's pretty clear now that the answer is, what does that mean about Brian Kelly? It means nothing. Because he has had support staff follow him from Notre Dame, and now he's got guys who have crossed paths with him at various points of his career at different stops that are joining him in Baton Rouge and leaving really good positions to do so. You add more ties, more SEC ties to this staff now, and you get guys that are familiar with the league and with Brian Kelly. I'll give you this is a Sean Payton line, but it's appropriate. Sean Payton always talked about in playing division opponents. It's so often why the Saints would bring in guys from the division because they knew the personnel, because they'd scouted them twice a year, and those people knew the division as well. It made for an easier transition. I think you see that in college coaching as well. I had this conversation with this is reaching into the Wayback Archives, but I had this conversation more than a decade ago with Houston Nutt. When Houston Nutt got fired at Arkansas after 2007 and took the Ole Miss job in 2008. And, I asked him about staying not only within the conference, but within the division and why that was appealing. And he said, the great advantage is that every team on my schedule, I've already got a scouting report. I know their coaches. I know their players. I know everything about them because we play them every year. So he already had a scouting report for LSU and for Mississippi State and for Alabama, for the whole West. I mean, that transition was so easy. So naturally, if you're Brian Kelly, you bring in guys onto your staff who have been in the SEC, who know the coaches, who know the talent, who've recruited the players, maybe in some cases even coached the players that you're going to see right now. So it strategically makes a ton of sense why Brian Kelly's gone this route. So they've added John Jancek, who's been a SEC defensive coordinator at multiple stops, including Tennessee, Kentucky, recently an analyst at Georgia. And he's also added an offensive analyst in Trent Miles. Trent Miles is the former head coach at Georgia State. Now, he's joining as an offensive analyst. This is first reported by Football Scoop, by the way. Tom James of Indiana State first reported the news. So, excuse me, I said Football Scoop. It was actually Indiana State who first reported it. Miles spent the 2007 through 2012 seasons as the head coach at Indiana State, which is his alma mater, and then 2013 to 2016 at Georgia State. He's also got NFL experience. He was a quality control coach with the Philadelphia Eagles and worked with their running backs in 2017, and then in 2019 left coaching and joined the Terre Haute Boys and Girls Club there in Indiana. But you're talking about a guy that has head coaching experience at the college level, and also, and this is the most important part of it, has experience with Mike Denbrock, LSU's new offensive coordinator. They worked together at Stanford in 2001 when Denbrock was Stanford's offensive tackles and tight ends coach. Miles was the wide receivers coach. So they were both on staff together at Stanford. And then both were on Tyrone Willingham's staff at Notre Dame. So, and then it goes even deeper. When Miles got the Indiana State head coaching job, Denbrock was his assistant head coach. Coaching can be very incestuous. So often you hire from within, you hire the people you know, it's very familial. But in many respects, when you have guys that know each other, that know coaching styles, that know how to communicate, that speak the same coaching language, for lack of a better phrase, it helps when you're trying to express that in meetings, then also to your players when people know each other. And then also have deep respect for each other and the job that they might be able to do. And then when you're talking about recruiting as well, you have guys with ties to the West Coast and to the Midwest. So there's a lot that makes sense about it as you start to assemble a support staff. It may not be the deep roster that Ed Orgeron wanted as he was trying to keep pace with Nick Saban and the glut of analysts that Nick Saban had. And I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way to do it, but this is just a different way of doing it. And man, it is super impressive when you look at the resumes of the coaches Brian Kelly is adding to his support staff, his on-field staff, but also his support staff. I mean, former head coaches and major college football coordinators as support staff members. It is impressive, the staff that he is putting together right now. Two more analysts have joined, again, with Trent Miles and John Jancek. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.